If you clicked on this video, and you are a Metroid Prime 4 hater, or one who is sleeping on just how incredible this game is going to be this year, then you're in for a rude awakening, because if you listen to me throughout this video and hear what I have to say, you may come to realize Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is actually a very, very big deal, and it is indeed happening in this year of 2025, which I just find hilarious, by the way. The fact that Nintendo has repeatedly told us the game is coming out this year, yet people still can't trust Nintendo themselves as a source. So how can we believe anything out there nowadays if we can't even trust the official source themselves when they tell us officially, repeatedly, for over a year that something is happening? With that all said, hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and all the different wrinkles and angles surrounding this game. Is it coming out this year? Yes it is, Nintendo has told us repeatedly. But when is it coming out this year? Why am I so confident that we are so close to a bevy of information about this game? We're going to be talking about what this bevy of information may be, how they're going to handle it, the contents of this game and the potential it may have. Might there be multiplayer? Will there be other exciting elements that will really change the opinions of people on this game? What about Metroid Prime 2 and 3? There are different things going on that are interesting to discuss when it comes to Metroid Prime 4, so that's what we're doing today. But if you are not a Metroid Prime 4 hater, then let me take this moment to ask that you consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell, because I talk about Nintendo news, rumors, and theories pretty much every day. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. But let's tackle the most consistent topic regarding Metroid Prime 4 as of late. Is it coming out in 2025? When is the release date? So yes, Nintendo repeatedly has said Metroid Prime 4 is coming out in the year 2025. Whenever you look at Metroid Prime 4 on Nintendo's own official website, they will say Metroid Prime 4 is coming out in 2025. You look at all their financial results briefings where they list their different games, Metroid Prime 4, 2025. You look at all these different venues that are demoing Metroid Prime 4, it will also say there, Metroid Prime 4 coming out in 2025. The game has been rated in so many different regions as of late, including ESRB. If it was just one or two, which has happened over the last few months, maybe there's still some wiggle room there. But the fact that we're seeing ratings coming out worldwide here, that goes to show that not only is this game likely not going to get delayed, but is pretty much totally done, and Nintendo's going to be telling us about this game very, very soon. And just another thing, I'm recording this late into August 26th of 2025. If Nintendo were going to delay this game, because yes, Nintendo has delayed games before where they tell us a particular date and that date does not hold, they would have told us they're delaying this game already. You look at Tears of the Kingdom, yeah, initially it was slated for 2022. They delayed it early on in the year of 2022. Or look at Animal Crossing, also delayed to a year later, but they announced that earlier on in the year. We are so late into the year already, they are not going to announce a delay. That seems extremely unlikely. That would be unprofessional, I would say, and really bad for Nintendo's overall image. I do not think that's what's going to happen here. What's going to happen is that the game is going to come out in the year of 2025 as Nintendo, the official source, the creator of Metroid Prime 4, has been telling us for over a year. But when in the year of 2025 is it going to come out? Because, yeah, we're getting later and later to the year, and we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, and people are getting a little antsy. When is it going to come out? I will admit there's a little bit of a concern. Prime 4 might come out in the month of December. And that's a concern of mine, because I do feel like if you come out in December as opposed to, say, November or October, you're missing out on a little bit of those holiday sales. You'll still enjoy some holiday sales in early December, but not as much compared to, say, if you were to come out early November or late October. And then also, in December, you would miss out on eligibility for this year's Game Awards, and then you could say, well, okay, there's always next year. Sure, Metroid Prime 4 would be eligible for the Game Awards show for next year if it comes out in December, but real talk, I don't think people are going to assess Metroid Prime 4 fairly for next year's Game Awards show if it comes out in December. I honestly think that it's terrible that the Game Awards has a cutoff in November. I think they should wait until January to actually have the award show. That way all games that make it out in a particular year can be appropriately assessed, but they don't do that. And so instead, I feel like games that do come out, say in December, won't actually have a chance to be in the award show until a year later, where recency bias, I do think, plays a factor, and some games are not going to be as fairly considered, like if Prime 4 does end up coming out this December. That said, at the end of the day, not that big of a deal, and I do think that if a game is going to sell well, whether it comes out March, April, August, October, November, December, it's going to sell well. So if Prime 4 ends up coming out in December, it's not the end of the world. But if I had to place my money, if I had to make a bet on when this game is coming out, this is what I would bet. And you know what? Call this an official prediction by AndresRestart. This is when I actually think it's happening. Prime 4 is either coming out in the last week of October or the last week of November. I talked about this the other day, but if you look throughout the entire Switch era, excluding 1 year, Nintendo has made sure to have a published release come out in either the last week of October or the first week of November, regardless of whether there's another game coming out in October or November or both. Nintendo several times has published 3 to 4 titles on Switch between October and November. So just because Pokemon Legends ZA is coming out October 16th, and just because Kirby Air Riders is coming out on November 20th, does not mean they wouldn't have another game, and actually, based off the history of things, as I've just been explaining, it makes sense to think that there's going to be at least one more title, and it makes sense for it to be in either the last week of October or the first week of November. Now, it doesn't have to be Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, but of all the titles we know about that are supposed to come out this year, this clearly makes the most sense, not to mention the official, yes, this is an official collaboration, Metroid Prime 1 through 3 art book is coming out October 28th. It was supposed to come out a couple months ago, but it was delayed, interestingly, to October 28th, a week where we have a very interesting vacancy where, historically speaking, Nintendo would put something out during that period of time. What do I think? I think Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is probably coming out during this 2-week period. And I stress this 2-week period because there is also Metroid Prime 2 and 3. What's going on with those? Those were rumored for such a long time. Are they going to happen? And my personal take is that they are indeed going to happen. They are going to come out this year. I could be wrong on that, and honestly, I wouldn't mind if I was wrong on that. I'm okay with just getting Metroid Prime 4 this year. You don't actually need to play Metroid Prime 2 or 3 to enjoy Prime 4. All the Metroid Prime games can be played independently of the others. Yes, there is a connected story. Yes, you can have maybe perhaps a greater appreciation of the story and the lore by playing the other games, but you don't need it to enjoy and grasp the full experience. That said, I am leaning in the direction of Prime 2 and 3, yes, coming out this year before Prime 4 releases. However, I do not think they'll be getting big boy remasters like Prime 1. There'll be more simple reworkings, kind of similar to Pikmin 1 and 2. Think of it like this. We got a Pikmin 3 Deluxe for Switch 1, and then a little bit later into the Switch era, we got Pikmin 4, but right before Pikmin 4 came out, we got Pikmin 1 and 2 on the eShop. They ran at a higher resolution with quality of life updates, but beyond that, there were no significant changes. I would expect something similar for Metroid Primes 2 and 3. Some quality of life updates so they can work appropriately on Switch 2, perhaps even with mouse controls. Offer the same customization options we see in Metroid Prime Remastered. Probably also have an update for Prime Remastered to run better on Switch 2 and also have mouse controls. But Prime 2 and 3 would just have like a minor upscale in terms of resolution. And even with just that subtle change, they actually probably would look pretty nice, but that's all they would do, and they could come out a little bit before Prime 4 comes out. If that doesn't happen, then I don't think Prime 2 and 3 are coming out anytime soon, and we'll just see them later down the road at some point during the Switch 2 era still, but not anytime soon. But let's now start talking about how good this game is going to be. the entire Metroid Prime series are amongst the most critically acclaimed games to ever come out. Even the most poorly reviewed Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is still an incredible game and would be up for Game of the Year if a game of that caliber were to come out this year. So even if Metroid Prime 4 ends up being the worst of the Prime series, odds are still going to be a Game of the Year caliber kind of game in that conversation, at least around the level of, say, a Donkey Kong Bonanza. And I'm speaking strictly from a critical acclaim perspective. Everyone can have their own opinions. Maybe you might think Mario Kart World is the best game of the year. Maybe you might think Dragon Drive is your personal game of the year. I'm sure most would disagree with that, but hey, opinions are opinions. There is such a thing as a Metroid Prime 4 hater. I don't think that makes any sense, but hey, opinions are opinions. That all said, from a critical acclaim perspective, the history shows that the Metroid Prime series is amongst the very best. And so I expect that Metroid Prime 4 will be about the same, if not even on the higher end actually. Metroid Prime Remastered came out early 2023, and while some people certainly doubt if Retro Studios can do something so great again because it's been such a long time, Prime Remastered is their most recent offering, and that is one of the highest reviewed games on the Nintendo Switch. So, while it is just a remastering of the original masterpiece, they did do a great job of it. It did show that they still only output quality, and that's something else to be said here. Retro Studios, while their output has been greatly reduced over the years, I think a lot of this has to do with a certain quality expectation. They have only ever come out with high quality games, some of the best games to come out for their respective years when they have come out. And so we could look at it from one perspective and say the fact that they haven't come out with anything recently is a point of concern. I would argue the fact that they are coming out with something means they finally have something that's meeting their quality standard, and it's going to be a great game. And we've already talked about how Prime 4 is definitely coming out this year. Source Nintendo themselves. But something else to consider here is that Metroid Prime 4 is an expensive title for Nintendo. They've been working on this game for many years. Throughout the entire Switch era, they had to restart development. They then moved it over to Retro Studios, where perhaps it probably should have started to begin with, but Retro Studios throughout the entire Switch era has been hiring some of the most high quality talent in the industry, at least on the west side of things. And you know, the Prime producer Kensuke Tanabe has been hard at work as well, and he also always produces quality games. Reminder, Retro Studios is entirely owned by Nintendo. I kind of hate how some people say Retro Studios is like third party or second party. No, Nintendo owns the studio outright 100%, meaning it is literally Nintendo. It's just a different studio in a different part of the world, but it's still being upheld by that Nintendo philosophy, by the Nintendo quality standard. And Nintendo themselves, Kensuke Tanabe, the Prime producer, when they announced the restart back in early 2019, they did promise that they want this game to measure up to the caliber of the Metroid Prime series. And so they've been working on this game, trying to get it right all this time. The fact that it's coming out now says to me that they made good on their promise. So I have full confidence that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a great game. And from what we've seen so far, as someone who knows about Metroid quite a bit, I feel like I can say that I've certainly seen the signs that the quality is absolutely there. Sure, perhaps for some people, you look at the game and you say they haven't shown that much. I'm concerned. Like, some people look at the first area of the game and they make the assumption that that's what the entire game is about. But if you played Metroid Prime 3, you would understand this is simply an introductory area, a fast-paced intro to get you sucked into the overall narrative, teach you the controls within about 10 to 15 minutes, and then you're thrown into a very alien, isolated world that will lead to a whole bunch of amazing adventure, discovery, mystery, and mystique. But people who have played the Metroid Prime 4 demo have actually said some really fantastic things, even if it is just about the beginning of the game. The mouse controls work really well. Obviously, there are some that disagree who just dislike mouse controls, but the prevailing opinion is that Metroid Prime 4 plays beautifully. It's also one of the most visually striking games on the platform, for Switch 2 or Switch 1. The Switch 2 version has improved textures, high dynamic range, running at 4K at a smooth, rock-solid 60 frames per second, or there's even the 120 FPS option at 1080p, which is interesting considering that Metroid Prime 4 is a high-fidelity game. It's a high-detailed game, unlike other games that are running at 120 FPS on the console, like Silksong, for example. It's a beautiful game, but this is an indie title that's 2D, right? It's not something that would be demanding for the hardware, and so of course they're able to get a game like that running at 120 frames per second, but to get something like Metroid Prime 4, which has lots of detail and a lot going on, that's a whole other beast. And so that's just Retro Studios showing just how incredible they are. They are masters of making things work. But while we have seen some of Metroid Prime 4, and I do think that some gives us some evidence to expect a really incredible adventure here, there's still so much we haven't seen. We are barely scratching the surface here for this experience. We've only seen the first few minutes from the demo, and then the opening moments of Viros, the beginning of the game, essentially. And I've made this comparison a few times already, but I do think there's something to it. We look at Donkey Kong Bonanza, currently, most would agree, is the best game so far this year from Nintendo, and one of the best games of the year just overall, period. And when we had initially seen this game, we had not seen that much. We had seen treehouse footage for the first two areas of the game, Ingot Isle and the Lagoon Lair, and a lot of people weren't so impressed by this game. A lot of people weren't really high on this game quite yet. It wasn't until the Donkey Kong Bonanza Nintendo Direct, where Nintendo opened the floodgates on this game, it really kicked into high gear with the marketing of this game, telling us everything we need to know going into this experience, where everyone all of a sudden changed their tunes and started talking about Donkey Kong as one of the best games of the year, and perhaps a historic release. And so, looking at Metroid Prime 4, we've only seen the very first few minutes of the game, and the opening moments of that second area, the true beginning of the game. Not too different from what we saw of Donkey Kong with Ingot Isle and the Lagoon Lair. Nintendo might be managing the marketing behind their big adventure games in a similar way, where they just show off a little bit of the beginning areas and keep everything else under close wraps until it's closer to release, where they open the floodgates and kick marketing into high gear here. And so yeah, there are rumors that there's going to be a Metroid Prime 4 Direct, and I believe those rumors, if not even for the rumors, but because I've been theorizing about a Metroid Prime 4 Direct for such a long time. I've been theorizing that throughout this year we'd be getting many different game-specific or series-specific Nintendo Directs, because this is the launch year of Switch 2. That's what they did back in the first year of Switch 1. They had a lot of game series-specific Nintendo Directs, and the exact same thing is happening this year. We've already gotten 3, and I don't think they've stopped. I think there's going to be at least one more, perhaps even something else beyond that. Metroid Prime 4 deserves its own Direct. I think, yeah, we're probably going to get like a release date trailer in a Direct before a Prime 4 Direct, but then we'll get the Prime 4 Direct, and then the game will come out. And so I expect this release date trailer is going to be exciting. It's going to actually have the release date that's going to pique the interest for many. They're going to showcase some elements about this game that people did not know about, and then they'll announce that Prime 4 Direct where they'll really start to dive into this game and really start to sell people just how incredible this game is going to be, and then it'll come out soon afterwards, because if I'm right about it coming out late October, early November, we're really not that far off. This is late August. We're talking about 2-ish months here. That's it. Nintendo's going to have a very short window here, maybe about a 6-week huge sort of marketing campaign. Not too different from Tears of the Kingdom, by the way, another epic adventure from Nintendo that came out back in 2023, where we actually saw a similar scenario where Nintendo was very quiet in the game. People knew it was coming out in May, but Nintendo had not said that much in the game, so people were freaking out, and it got to the point where people almost gave up on Nintendo telling us about the game before it was going to come out, and then all of a sudden Nintendo announced that Aonuma was going to do a presentation on the game showing off how it played, and then all of a sudden all the marketing kicked into high gear. This is going to be a big deal adventure. This is going to be one of the best games Nintendo has ever put out. It will at least be one of the best games of the year. I honestly think it has a fantastic chance to win Game of the Year. I actually think it's going to be considered an overall better game than even Donkey Kong Bonanza, and just for the record, I love Donkey Kong Bonanza. I'm getting close to 100%ing the game, and then I'll finally do my review. But this game's going to be just straight up totally incredible. And the closer we get to this game coming out, the more and more my hype starts to build. But what are we missing here? What has Nintendo been holding back on this game? And really, I think there's a lot, and obviously I don't know everything, but you look at the key art for Metroid Prime 4, there's this massive desert behind Samus that we have seen zero gameplay for, but there are also varying points of interest. I don't think this is just fluff or just art to be art. I think it's actually something meaningful to the game, to the experience. I expect there will be some vast open areas to enjoy in Prime 4. I am not saying Prime 4 is going to be an open world game like Breath of the Wild. And no, I don't think that Metroid Prime 4's Breath of the Wild moment would be it being open world. I remember talking about that years ago, and I think a lot of people just looked at the title, didn't listen to my words, and grossly misunderstood the point. The point is that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be an evolution for the series. It's going to bring in things about it that will bring it to another level. Not saying it won't feel like Metroid, still going to feel like Metroid, as we've seen so far, but it's going to be an opportunity to showcase this game to a new audience where perhaps it can reach a new level of success. And we've seen so many different games throughout the Switch era reach a new level of success. Even Metroid Dread became the best-selling Metroid game to date, and that is a 2D Metroid game, and in general, 3D games have a greater chance to be successful, at least amongst Nintendo titles. So I do think Prime 4 has an opportunity here to eclipse Metroid Dread, perhaps by a substantial margin, especially if there are some special things that they're holding back here, like some exciting open areas, like some mechanics that they haven't really delved into yet, like the psychic abilities, which from what we've seen so far may really just be scratching the surface here. And then there's also the whole narrative element to this game. Who is Sylix? Sylix has been pursuing Samus since Metroid Prime 3. It's this mysterious character that's been teased in different games all throughout the years. We're finally going to learn about this character, and based on what we saw from the demo, clearly there's a lot of work being put into the narrative here for Prime 4, which is kind of a breath of fresh air compared to most Nintendo titles. So I think there's a lot to be excited about here. Some people might be asking about, what about multiplayer? We did see from the ESRB rating that there's going to be in-game purchases. What does that mean exactly? There's a variety of possibilities. It could indeed hint at multiplayer, it could just simply hint at a paid expansion to the game later on, or maybe it's just hinting at people having the option to buy the Switch 2 edition if they just have the Switch 1 version, to pay for that upgrade. These are all possibilities. I will say currently, I'm leaning in the direction of Metroid Prime 4 and not having a big multiplayer mode, like maybe they might have something like that, but I'm kind of just getting the sense that this is just going to be an epic adventure. Like, if there is a 3D Mario game coming out, if there is a 3D Zelda game coming out, people wouldn't be talking about, oh, is there going to be multiplayer? Maybe there will be some element of multiplayer, but I'm not sure it's going to be like a Halo or a Call of Duty style multiplayer, although I do think there's a lot of potential there. I'm just not sure if that's what they're focused on for this particular game. If they are, great, but I don't think it's needed for this game to be a GOAT, a greatest of all time kind of game. But I will throw out there, since Metroid Prime is a 3D Metroidvania, right, that perhaps they can integrate a feature we've seen from other games that are basically like 3D Metroidvanias, like the Dark Souls series or Elden Ring, where there is kind of like messages that are provided from other players you can find throughout the world, and they could perhaps even introduce a PvE or PvP sort of mechanic to the game, where perhaps someone can invade your world and hunt you, be an opposing hunter, and they can represent as some sort of threatening ghost, which may fit perfectly with the lore of the game, because Samus clearly is dealing with some sort of ancient ghosts here on some sort of weird planet with psychic powers, so I don't think it would be that much of a stretch and might fit the game really well. Of course, this is an idea coming from the Soulsborne series, and Retro Studios may not want to just outright copy that, but we did see something like this in Mario Wonder, so, you know, it's possible, and sometimes I just think you should adopt a good idea. Just because you didn't come up with the idea doesn't mean it's not a good idea. We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? People figure out things before us, and then we build on top of that. We find new ways to improve and honor the accomplishments of the past at the same time. But with that all said, I think Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to go above and beyond. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this game, probably because they haven't played a Metroid Prime game or haven't played a modern Metroid Prime game because there hasn't been one, and also because people just like to doom and gloom. But Metroid Prime 4 is set up to be an incredible masterpiece. I am so ready for this game. It's my most anticipated game of the year. It's been my most anticipated game for a very, very long time, and we are close. We are on the cusp of the blowout tier. It's finally coming, and it's gonna be an incredible time for us Metroid fans, and maybe not so much for those Metroid haters, which should not have clicked on the video. I literally told you to not click on the video, but something tells me there are going to be people in the comments complaining about Metroid because that's just how the internet works. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.